who is Anne Edminster of Design Avenues. Anne's an architect who has been a long time kind of friend of Bayren, and is doing some work on both new construction homes that are all electric, but also in this case is going to talk mostly about remodeling of existing homes to be fire resistant and energy efficient. So Anne, turn it over to you.
Okay, sorry about the delay there, folks. Technology is wonderful. Emily and all, I did change my slide title after working on a little bit more because there's quite a bit here that's relevant to new construction. In fact, the vast majority of it is, but I will be looking at it primarily through the lens of a retrofit project. So we'll start there. Anyway, I thought it's nice to sort of provide a little context for this work and to say, here we are with all the hazards or a few of the hazards that surround us. So we live in moderate to high to very high fire hazard severity zones, most of us, and many in areas that also experience landslides. And pandemics and whatnot, all in the day-to-day for us these days. So let's see. I'm going to talk a little bit, I'm breaking this up just into 3 sections: efficiency, synergies, so where these issues come together, efficiency, electrification, and wildfire protection. And then I'll talk a little bit about electrification, and then some that is specific to new construction. And again, you see my call out here on the right that all of these retrofit opportunities apply as well to new construction, albeit in, not the remove and replace version, but start afresh with these strategies. And I also wanted to start with make the point that when we talk about resiliency to wildfire in the Bay Area and beyond, certainly many parts of California and perhaps elsewhere, this has come to be very closely associated with the public safety power shutoffs. And so for many of the people that I work with, this is all wrapped up together. So they want to be more wildfire resilient and more resilient to the public safety power shutoffs. So this is kind of a constellation of concerns. Okay. So here we go into the efficiency synergies and looking at this, first of all, in a very global way. When we do a better job with building enclosures, we are conferring health benefits across the board. First of all, we're creating a structure that will maintain a stable indoor temperature when the power is out. And for many who are elderly or otherwise vulnerable, this is beyond a comfort issue. It's actually a life and safety benefit. Very, very important. And further, indoor air stays indoors and outdoor air stays outdoors. So if we are doing an appropriate job with providing balanced ventilation, then we also do a better job of protecting the air quality for occupants in buildings in areas prone to wildfire and smoke intrusion from wildfires, whether those fires are in proximity or not. There's been a huge amount of smoke impact in areas that were otherwise not directly threatened by fire throughout California in the last few years. And by the way, just a couple of words about my background. I lived until mid-2019 in San Mateo County and then moved to Sonoma County, but starting in late 2017, shortly after the first truly catastrophic fires in this century in Sonoma County, I helped create Rebuild Green Expo 2 years running, 2018 and 2019, working with a team of colleagues here in the North Bay. And so I became very close to these considerations and a lot of the people who were involved in these efforts. And then moving here, of course, we had the lovely pleasure of experiencing more fires, more smoke, more PTSD of all the people we work with and are surrounded by in Sonoma County. So these are issues that are very near and of deep concern to me and many of my colleagues and family, of course. Okay, so one of my clients at present lives in the Oakland Hills, and I'm not getting too specific about location just to protect their privacy, but I've pointed out the location of the home on the map. You can see it's right at the juncture between a very high fire hazard zone and a very high landslide zone. So prime real estate, if you look at the numbers, and yet this is the reality of the house. Also, this is a vintage 1970s house, and notwithstanding being within this area of prime real estate, was not tremendously well built. And I'm being kind when I say that. The owners are well aware of this, and they've made many improvements over the years. But with the advent of the fires and all that comes with, they decided it was time to make some more improvements. So the primary consideration for them was getting to zero carbon operations. They're very climate concerned. And secondary consideration, but by no means minor, was also fire safety. So we began this project. I've got a number of very talented and knowledgeable people working with me on this team that I brought together because of their respective areas of expertise. And one thing I want to add too, that in so many conversations about green building of all kinds, we talk about the importance of an integrated approach to design. And I'm a firm believer in this. And so I like to start all my projects by tapping all the talent that I think we need. And in this case, including the general contractor. So I really encourage the owners to engage a general contractor early on. I help them connect with a GC that I knew would be very much on board with all of the high performance strategies and fire protection, and has very meticulous builder. So he has been a very important part of the team from the outset, along with a number of others, including Steve Quarles, who is a nationally recognized fire protection expert that I'm sure Jeremy and Bob are familiar with and probably worked with through the Institute for Building and Home Safety on the East Coast. So here are some of the things we looked at. You guys, I think, probably are all pretty well versed in what it means to create an efficient home, what electrification means, and perhaps even on fire protection measures. So I'm not trying to attempt to address each of those areas comprehensively, rather the intersections among them. And in most cases, where they intersect in this particular project. And this is really simplified. We have a very large spreadsheet with lots of detail about all of the aspects of the project we're dealing with. So we're boiling it down to essentials here. On the outside of the enclosure, we're removing the siding, which is T111 and very bad shape. It's been there since the home was built in the 70s. This will enable us to air seal, install new cavity insulation, add non-combustible continuous exterior insulation, which, by the way, will be mineral wool. And it is true, it does have high embodied carbon, and we are concerned with embodied carbon. And yet the trade-off, of course, is looking at the longevity of the structure. And so here's a classic it depends thing, right? Where when we balance or trade off issues in the world of green building and high performance, there's rarely a solution that is perfect across all parameters. So this is a classic conundrum that we face. In this case, we are going to be going with rock wool for its many positive attributes, notwithstanding the high embodied carbon. And we will also install a new non-combustible siding. So, and you'll see I'm calling out the various benefits with these bubbles. Dual benefit, essentially, we're saying this is a fire safety benefit. When we air seal well, we reduce the possibility for smoke intrusion from the exterior. And also we're reducing ember intrusion, which we do through other measures as well. Cavity insulation, primarily an efficiency benefit. The non-combustible continuous exterior insulation, dual benefit, both providing fire safety and improving thermal performance. And then, of course, the siding is primarily a fire safety benefit. The next aspect of enclosure we're looked at is windows. So this home has a mix of a lot of single pane aluminum frame windows, a few dual pane windows. So it's kind of a mishmash architecturally and also in terms of performance. It is likely that we will replace all of them, not just the single pane windows, with new higher performing dual glaze windows. And those windows will also be tempered on both panes. That's a fire safety protection measure. We'll go with a metal clad window. Vinyl windows in particular are very vulnerable to fire. They deform very easily. And that's not even talking about the known combustion toxins released when vinyl meets flame. So it's also a durability measure. And then the windows will also be all compression close units, and that provides a dual benefit as well. So when you close a window with a compression mechanism, whether that's an awning, a hopper, or a casement, you're able to create a much tighter close to that window than with a sliding unit, whether that's a single hung, double hung, or traditional side-by-side slider, because sliding units are by their nature leakier to air and therefore smoke, embers, and so forth. So that's a double benefit. Okay, moving on at lightning speed here. Venting, of course, Bob and Jeremy talked about dryer vents. We'll be replacing the dryer vent on this home with one that has an ember intrusion feature. And then also we are actually eliminating both the attic and crawl space as ventilated spaces and converting them to unvented spaces. In the process of doing that, not only do we have the dual benefit of energy and fire improvements related to removing those ember intrusion opportunities, we will also be moving insulation to the roof plane, insulating the crawl space walls instead of under the floor, neither of which is insulated at present. And by the way, the present ceiling insulation is decidedly subpar given the vintage of the home. And having these newly insulated spaces gives us a wonderful opportunity to install new all-electric mini splits and ducting in those insulated areas. So this is a win in so many ways. So it's an efficiency and electrification opportunity. We'll probably be replacing most of the ducting at the same time, which is also was not, well, actually there's a very funny story about the ducting. I don't have a picture of this, but after visiting the house a couple times and scratching our heads a little bit and digging deeper with each visit, we eventually realized that the current gas furnace is now serving both floors of the house. And the only way it serves the upper story is by running the ducting out through the wall of the crawl space, up the outside of the building enclosure in a little boxed chase, and then back in to the attic. So the house was actually built without any real thought about the inclusion of mechanical infrastructure in the house. So I must say, I have visited hundreds and hundreds of houses through the course of my career, but I've never seen one that so thoroughly failed to address space conditioning. So as I used to tell many of my remodeling clients, think of demolition as opportunity. This is a great opportunity for us to fix so many wonderfully entertaining features of this house. Okay, we move from venting to ventilation. And this was a funny conversation or exchange I had with my client too, and realizing that one of our challenges in working in this space is communication. And we know the difference between venting and ventilation, but to most of the world, that distinction is not clear at all. So we will be, in this case, providing most likely heat recovery, ventilation, HRV system, placing those as well in the newly insulated attic and crawl spaces. So, and providing clean air, as I mentioned early on, is tremendously important at all times, but especially during the wildfire season. And of course, this also does confer an efficiency benefit. Okay, skylights. Now, this particular house does not have skylights. However, so many do, and this is something that is, let's say, people who love skylights really love skylights, and they can be wonderful. They can impart a great quality of light to a space. However, you're poking a hole in your roof. So from my perspective, you have to have a very darn good reason to poke a hole in your roof. So if there are other ways of providing adequate light, then avoid skylights. And in the case of retrofits, if you're considering a roof replacement, as this home is for various reasons, and or adding solar, this is a great opportunity to consider whether those skylights are really needed or not. And as you see in the lower right corner, I basically said, in the case of new construction, let's just not go there unless there's, again, a really compelling reason to get that light in and you can't do it successfully another way. And you'll also see I've stolen this photo from Steve Quarles, who's a good friend and colleague, showing that skylights are also an aspect of the design that can foster the accumulation of flammable debris. So yet another reason to think in less cozy terms of skylights. Okay, so that was a whole bunch of synergies. Now we'll move on to electrification, which is a mixed bag, let's say. First of all, photovoltaics also can represent a risk of accumulation of debris that can be a fire risk. Of course, everything else about photovoltaics we love naturally, from an efficiency, electrification, grid balancing, all these things we look to in our clean energy future. Photovoltaics are a desirable feature. So we don't hold that against them. It's simply a word of caution. Now, battery storage, of course, many people, again, looking at resiliency in the face of wildfires and their accompanying power outages, are very, very interested in battery storage. In fact, I've spoken with some reps with solar vendors who are saying, yeah, most of our solar installations now are, if not actually installing batteries, we're definitely having conversation about them, and a really high percentage are in fact including batteries with their solar installations, with all the benefits that are fairly obvious, right? You get to have all those electric benefits that your neighbors who don't have batteries mostly will not. Mixed fuel homes, of course, get to keep functioning to some extent, at least if they have the type of stoves that can be lit with a match ignition. Many that are newer don't really provide that option. Now, the one thing about battery storage, or I should say, that is less of a synergy. So you don't have those benefits in an all-electric home without battery storage. So, and a lot of people do fret about the loss of cooking capacity, but as I said, realistically, not all stoves will allow you to keep cooking when the power is out, because stoves also, that is gas stoves, also plug into the wall. So that ability can go away with newer models that don't have the ability to light with a match. And as I've been pointing out to those of my clients who are concerned about this, it is possible to keep cooking if you have a camp stove or barbecue. So let's not worry too much about this. There are ways of getting food to the table if we're just a little bit flexible and creative. Okay, and then just a few comments here about new construction as well. Something that's definitely not a synergy, complex roof forms. As you saw with skylights, there's the possibility for debris accumulation. All of these excrescences on elaborate roofs are more opportunities. And again, I have some photos that Steve Coral's passed on to me from the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety, showing this does in fact occur, and it is very much an ignition hazard in a wildfire situation. However, there is a distinct synergy. The flip side of this coin, the yin to the yang, is that simpler roof forms are better in all ways. When you create a simple roof form in new construction, you're creating something that's going to be much more amenable to doing a very good job of insulating, air sealing, and heating than a more complicated structure. And of course, it's a lot easier to get PVs to fit well and gracefully on simple roofs, and again, far fewer places for that flammable debris collection hazard to occur. So I'm a huge fan of simple roofs. Some of you have perhaps heard me wax lyrical about that from time to time. It is a pet peeve indeed. So the last thing I wanted to comment on is the notion of putting this all together, that when we create highly efficient, all electric homes, and those with batteries in particular, we're starting to create the building blocks of microgrids and community microgrids. And ultimately, our resiliency as communities rests within this future where instead of having a large centralized grid infrastructure where vast areas are vulnerable to the types of disasters that we've experienced, we can start to localize how we address our resiliency needs when we have distributed energy resources, both production and storage, within more confined geographic areas. So the future of the electric grid, in my vision, is a connected network of smaller grid units, each of which can function independently in case of need. So when we create our homes as all electric and battery equipped, then we are starting to create this future. And I think that's really where our sites should be looking to. And ultimately, some of this will happen on a home by home basis or structure by structure basis. But ultimately, as we all know, not every building or single family home is really a realistic candidate to fulfill all these functions independently. And it's not nearly as economical to do that on an individual structure basis as it is on a more collective basis. So ultimately, I think this is where our vision should be going. And that is it for my presentation, and happy to jump into questions or move to the panel, whatever's next.
And thank you. I do have a question or two for you since we've got about 5 minutes. Since I asked this to Scott and he said he'd be curious to hear your answer, but maybe I'll flip it a bit. Instead of what are homeowners asking for, maybe what are you as a designer? Maybe what are like the top 2 things that you've changed in terms of how you design as a response to the increasing wildfires? Like, are there certain things you just don't do anymore, or strategies you think are more important than ever?
Well, to be clear, I'm not a practicing designer myself. I work with other design teams, facilitate the collection of expertise to address all of these problems simultaneously. You know, I think that looking at these synergies is probably the top thing, is to say, hey, look, there's so many things that we can do that are wins on multiple fronts. And sort of like my comment earlier that think of demolition as opportunity. You know, whenever we're doing work of any kind on a house is the most fruitful and economical time to do more work on a house or a building, right? And something that we know from research is that when people undertake a major remodel or retrofit project, they're unlikely to do so again within a fairly long time period. So it really is that crucial moment to insert these measures. Like, don't just think about solving whatever is on your mind today, but widen your lens to look at the larger array of both threats and opportunities posed in the course of doing a remodeling project or building a new home. And I think this is most true when we're doing remodels, again, because people won't tackle it again, but same argument applies with new construction, right? When a new home is built, it probably isn't going to be touched again for quite a long time. And given we have really less than 10 years now to turn around the engine of climate change, we should only be going deep. As they say, you know, what is it? Go deep or go home. It's like faint measures avail us not right now.
Thank you. I'm sure we'll have more questions at the panel, but since to stay on time, I think we'll move on to our last speaker,